If you're watching this video, you probably have a fish tank or you're about to get a fish tank. And if you have one, maybe you keep it in like your bedroom or your home office like these. Some of you may have a couple of aquariums in your living room or somewhere in your house like this. But how many of you have a room like this, a room dedicated to aquariums? Well, today I'm going to talk about the pros and cons about having a fish room or some type of room dedicated to your aquariums. Hey fish friends, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Zenzo from Tazawa Tanks. This video is not to persuade or dissuade anybody from having a fish room. I'm merely sharing my experiences from what I've encountered over the years as far as what I like about having a fish room and some of the things that are real challenges. Now, one thing about having an aquarium room, a fish room, whatever you want to call it, a gallery, a room dedicated to fish tanks, it's awesome. You have all of these aquariums to enjoy, to spend time with, to show off, to be proud of. It's like an amazing thing if you're into aquariums and fish tanks. So if you do have the resources, if you do have the space, it's awesome. Another great thing about having a fish room is that you can have a bunch of different aquariums. So you can have diversity. One thing about the freshwater aquarium hobby is that there's different types of fish from different parts of the world. So lots of diversity when you have a room like this that has so many aquariums. Another great thing about having a fish room like this, or maybe not one quite as set up like this, but a room dedicated to aquariums, is that it's great for breeding. So if you are into breeding fish and having them spawn and sell them at fish clubs or sell them to stores, having a room that's dedicated to aquariums is a must. Another great thing about having a lot of fish tanks, specifically in one area, because you spend a lot of time with them, is that you learn a lot. Now, if you're doing it right, if you are in love with your tanks and have that passion, and if you are spending time with them, you are going to learn a lot about aquarium keeping, about fish tanks, just because you are dealing with so many different types of aquariums. Definitely, if you have multiple tanks, you're gonna learn a lot more than you would with just one or two tanks, which is great if you do want to kind of level up your fish keeping skills. Another great thing is economy of scale. Whether it's economy from a cost perspective or it's the economy from a time perspective, having them consolidated and all together makes things a lot easier. I don't use heaters in any of these aquariums in this room because I heat the room just with one heat source and all of my aquariums are fine. I would much rather have to do water changes on like 6 tanks in this room than have to do a water change on like 2 tanks upstairs, because I have everything together. So it just makes things a lot more economical money-wise and time-wise. Feeding, I can go around tank to tank to tank, and I can feed all these fish in just a couple of minutes, versus if they're spread all over the house, it's a whole different story. So there is a lot of benefit by having them all together. Another great thing about having them all together is filtration, and that kind of falls into that economy thing, right? So if you have aquariums spread out through your house, you're gonna have to have different types of filters providing filtration to those aquariums. Down in this room, I pretty much can run this entire room on one air pump. So I have an air pump that's tucked away in a corner, and around the entire perimeter of these walls, there are PVC pipes that run around the perimeter that have holes drilled into them with little valves screwed in, and there's air lines that drop out of those, and every one of those air lines can feed air to my aquariums, allowing me to run sponge filters, box filters, moving bed filters, etc. I do have a couple of other filters in here for a couple of reasons, which I've talked about in other videos, and I'll probably put a link of that up here. So if you do have a fish room, you could have one central air pump. Whether you have 10 tanks, 15, 20, 30, 40, you can run them all off that same air pump, so that does help. Now, the last thing I want to add as far as why I think it's great having a fish room is it's great to have one place where you can enjoy all of your aquariums together. I can sit in my easy chair here and look at my African cichlids, look at my mud skippers, look at my fish from South America, go over and play with my gobies and feed them, feed my puffers by hand, all in just one area. I can sit here, enjoy everything, get up, feed some bloodworms, sit back down, video them, just hang out, and it's a great space to be, especially the way that we've set this room up with the sound deadening and the temperature and everything. It's just a very enjoyable place to be. So if you're into fish as much as I'm into fish, then this might be the type of room for you. All right, now we've talked about all of the good stuff. Let's get real and talk about the stuff that's not so great. I don't want to say bad, but it's not so great. And so these are the cons of having a fish room. Now, the first con, it is time consuming. No matter how efficient you are, no matter what type of automated systems you might set up, you're still gonna have to spend a lot of time with your aquariums. And if you have a lot of aquariums, it is a lot of time. Now, we talked about economy of scale and economy of time. And so yes, having them all together is better. So if you already have 15 aquariums, it's better to have 15 aquariums in one spot versus spread out. But if you only have 2 aquariums, having a room full of them is definitely gonna take more time out of your day. Another con is pretty obvious, and that's space. Not everyone has a large room to dedicate to aquariums, and if you do, it's probably taking up space that you could have used for something else. Maybe it could have been an office or a guest room or a gym or a workshop or whatever it is that you're into or that you want to use that space for. That can be a detriment. And depending on where you live in the country or the world, space can be at a premium. I live in San Francisco, California, which is one of the most expensive places to live in the United States, if not in the world, as it relates to housing and space. So this space that I have dedicated to my aquariums is a large room that some people might want to use for something else. So that is something to consider, and I would say that it is a con, as it does take up a lot of room. Another thing that most people don't even think about when it comes to aquariums is humidity. Now, in your home, you might have a couple of aquariums and you don't notice any change in the humidity level of your home or your room or whatever it may be, because it's not a lot of water being dissipated into the ambient air, making it more humid. But if you consolidate a bunch of aquariums and you put them in one space, you are going to have some humidity issues. Now, down here in this room, I run a dehumidifier and it is a must. Humidity can be destructive. It can cause mildew, it can cause mold, it can mess up electrical, it can mess up wood and drywall and other things that you might have in that room. So having the humidity reduced by a dehumidifier is something that you're going to want to do, and that does add a cost, which we're going to get into. Another con about having a lot of fish tanks is if something goes wrong, it's amplified. So if you have 1 or 2 aquariums and something happens, most likely you're able to manage that situation. If there's a power outage, if something's going on, some kind of disaster, you could probably, take those fish out and put them in a bucket and take them with you to the hotel room with a air stone, or put a battery backup that has an air stone on there, or wrap your aquarium in a blanket so it doesn't get too cold, or do frequent water changes with warm water, something that you heat up on the stove to keep your fish from freezing. Whatever it may be, if you've got a couple of aquariums, you can probably manage that. It's going to be a lot of work. You're not going to want to do it, but it's manageable. If you have 30 aquariums, forget it. Like, if there's a disaster, you're not going to be able to put blankets around all your aquariums, and you're not going to be able to take your fish with you. So you're going to have a battery backups, a generator, some kind of life support system to take care of all of your aquariums, and that also becomes expensive. So things are great when they're all good, and when things go bad, it's just amplified because you have that many more fish and aquariums to take care of. Okay, so now let's get into probably the biggest con about having a fish room and multiple aquariums, and that's cost. That could be energy costs. It's also things like food. I'm very fortunate that Extreme Aquatic Foods supplies all of the food that I use for my fish here in this room and upstairs for free. So that is a huge savings. If I had to go out and buy food, I don't even know how much I would spend. Maybe like $1,200 a year or something, maybe $100 a month worth of fish food. But because I don't have to buy it, it's supplied to me, it is a big savings. But if you do have a lot of fish tanks and you have to feed them all, that is another cost that's going to build up, and it doesn't go away. It's an ongoing cost. Your energy bills ongoing, your water bill will be ongoing, your food costs will be ongoing, and then other stuff like maintenance, like if something breaks, that central air pump goes down or whatever it is, you're going to have to do maintenance, and it's just amplified when you have more and more tanks. There's one more con that I find to be the most difficult. Now, most people would say that the extra cost is a big con, and they don't like that, and I would understand and agree, but because of my situation, it doesn't bother me as much. But what does bother me is that I cannot get away without me really having to figure out what's gonna go on with this fish room and all my aquariums. If I have 1 or 2 fish tanks, 3 or 4 even, it's a lot easier. I can make sure they're heavily planted. I could put auto feeders on there. So there are things that I could do to help mitigate the necessity of having to have someone take care of those fish while I'm gone. But with all these aquariums, like I can't, you know, have really anybody like take care of them while I'm gone. No one's gonna be able to do water changes for all of these fish tanks. I don't have automated water changes. And even if I did, I couldn't take like 3 weeks vacation because then you'd have to have like 30 or 40 auto feeders. So these are all things that you have to think about if you're gonna have all these aquariums. You know, who's gonna take care of them if something happens to you, if you're going on vacation. So you'll have to have a plan for that. And that's one of the things that I don't like. So that's my list of the pros and cons about having a fish room and multiple aquariums. A lot of great things, but let me know in the comments if you have a fish room. Did I miss anything that should be on this list? Or are you considering a fish room and has this video helped change your mind or maybe given you something to think about before you move forward with your fish rooms? Hopefully this is helpful. If you want to see a video on what it's like in the day of the life of a fish keeper that takes care of aquariums as a career and does fish stuff, then watch this video right here.